Today on the Eye of Power, we have a guy who I got to say is a guy after my own heart in the sense that he's a musician, probably, frankly, a more accomplished musician than I am, but he has that passion for being a musician and leading a band, but really has built his career as a consultant and helping organizations. His latest is the Cost of Confusion. It's a book that identifies those things, the ways that a lack of clarity, lack of communication can really be very costly to all organizations. And he's adept at helping organizations see those things, get past them, and really guide in a direction where the businesses or the organization is operating much more cohesively and profitably and towards better ends. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome uh, Rich Layton to the show.
Welcome to the Eye of Power podcast. I'm your host, Tom Dardick. But this podcast is not about me. It's about you and your power. It's time to claim yours.
And I love the fact that you're a passionate guy that has a successful career in music, and then you also obviously care about people and want to make sure that they end up with the best. So, Rich, your book, The Cost of Confusion. When I see it, I'm like, obviously, confusion is costly because we don't know what to do. We don't see the right thing. We end up doing the wrong things. We end up miscommunicating or thinking other people are morons when we're making stupid mistakes ourselves, and it causes all this chaos. So how do you look at the confusion in organizations and that cost, and what can people do about it? I know that's a big question, but where do
Right,
you
it
start
is.
with that?
It is, and the whole purpose in the notion of cutting the cost of confusion was a way to quantify what organizations were losing or leaving on the table because they weren't spending the necessary money to do a polished communications piece, or to have a decent website or put video out there. And they always wondered, well, why do we have to spend the money on this particular piece of creative communications? And it's like, well, this is a drop in the bucket compared to what you're losing if you don't solve this problem. And so it started out as a way for me to just justify when people said, well, I don't know why it costs so much to do a professional video about this change management initiative that we have going on. And I would just have to explain why it was important, the difference that it would make, and that the investment had an incredible return. And so the cost of confusion was something that people could track. So you're spending this much on having these extra people and this much on you're losing this much sales because people don't understand your product. So getting people to walk through that process and put hard dollars onto things that were seemingly amorphous was what was the tipping point for me, if you will.
And what would you say some of the broad brushstrokes of the work that you put into the book and what you bring to that conversation that otherwise people might miss?
Good one. I think the piece for me was like being able to show these examples in every forum. So there's a chapter devoted to what happens when you confuse your customers, what happens when you confuse employees, what happens when you confuse citizens. And every day the paper has another thing that I could have dropped in the book. It's like I just picked a point to stop, but every day I can come up with another story about Boeing's cost of confusion. They're in the book, but Boeing's cost of confusion with moving these planes through their huge facility when parts of the work are being done out of sequence, incredibly expensive, as you can imagine. So it's really just showing what a universal concept this is, and to the fact that if there's an understanding deficit, if people don't understand something, and they're in a group of people who can impact your success, then you need to deal with them up front as a risk management piece.
I want to circle back to something you said about that communication piece. I know maybe you've encountered this in your work, Rich, when I'm working with clients, sometimes there can be oh, not another program kind of, oh, what's the new thing today? And there's a little bit of a calcification against any sort of efforts to change, efforts to learn new programs. So your communication piece seemed to point the light towards how important it is to frame things properly and say, look, here's what we're doing. Let people in on the secret here, not just throw something at them. Am I getting that right? Is there more to it than that in the communication to make sure we're set up for success?
Well, that framing it appropriately, that really is the key. You're framing your initiative, or you're framing your new product in terms of what's the benefit to the organization that we're part of, what's the benefit to us as individuals within that organization. It's always that, what's in it for me kind of thing that has to be up there right away,
Sure.
and in a very explicit way. So it's like, what's the thing that you hate most about your job right now? Well, I'm wasting time spinning my wheels doing these forms and these processes on 4 different websites. Well, what if you could enter all that information one time, and would you want to be part of that solution? And when you break down those kind of individual promises to each role, you get engagement, you're getting buy-in. And what a lot of organizations think is that people all buy in for one big, kumbaya moment. The reality is that people are going to buy for different reasons. People are going to engage for different reasons. So, when I work with a high technology company that's been marketing 26 features, and they want you to, they want to be sure that everybody sees all 26 features. And I have to say, listen, you do that, and people are going to glaze over like a Christmas ham. You're going to lose the sale. So this group of people is going to buy if we talk about feature 2, 3, and 9. This other group of people is going to buy for 12 and 13. And this other group of people is going to buy for 25. But that ability to kind of break down and give that agility and that kind of nimbleness to your marketing and your messaging, so that you get the right spin to the right person at the right time, is what makes the communication so highly effective, I think, compared to the way most organizations tend to operate.
I think that's super insightful. So the other thing I'm wondering, because obviously you've got a great experience, and you've these kinds of insights. To me, it smacks of it's hard worn experience. It seems like you've seen this happen. So that makes me wonder, Rich, how you got into the consulting world and getting into, coming up with a book called The Cost of Confusion.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I realize that I'm somebody who was, genetically incapable of surviving in a corporate structure. I was always the person that asked why. I mean, even as a little kid, I got in trouble, but why? But why? But why? And so, and organizations are famously bad at taking the time to explain why. Why are we asking you to do things a certain way? And I was blessed to be able to work my way through college with summer jobs, and they were always blue collar jobs. And so I'd be in the aluminum can factory in the lunchroom, and some new pronouncement from corporate would go up, and you could just hear everybody snicker and drop the B words, and and it's like, because these organizations weren't doing a decent job of communicating at a genuine level to the people that they depend on for success.
Right.
So, I mean, it was that, I don't know, naivete maybe, or that passion, that being this eternal optimist, that there's got to be an easier, better way to run this organization. There's got to be an easier, better way to harness the enthusiasm of people. I mean, I very rarely met people in any line of work that were cruising. I met people that wanted to make a difference. And
Yeah.
and I remember writing the mission statement when I formed Transform Communications. It's like, I want to celebrate people in the work that they do. I want to celebrate people in the work that they do. And that led to that idea of, we have gifts, and how can organizations make it easier for people to come in every day and give of their gifts and contribute to the success of the whole?
Yeah, that's that to me, that's music to my ears. In the AI power model, the purpose quadrant specifically is we increase our power there through the identification, development of our unique gifts and talents, and putting those to best service in the world and contributing to other people. And that process seems to me is what generates our sense of meaning and purpose. And so that's why I call it the purpose quadrant.
Right, right, right.
So it's the same thing that you're talking about there, where making sure that the road and the path towards that giving of the gifts. And another way of maybe seeing that is also people have a need to be seen for who they really are, even though they might be the ones putting up a front and making it hard to see them sometimes. That doesn't take away that need, and it becomes one of the greatest gifts we can give, is just to see people for who they are. So
Right.
I think we're talking about the same thing there. What are some of the things that you might have witnessed along those lines, where you've seen either a gift unlocked or something? It could go either way, right? You might see a tragic situation where somebody just was shut down and ended up having to leave, or just ended poorly. Or the other side of it is they were clamped down and something happened that opened them up, and now we have this shining superstar. Can you share any either stories or insights along those lines, Rich?
I recall a time when I watched two engineers almost come to blows over where an arrow should go on the
Okay.
flow chart, right? And I was like, used to think, oh, what can but finding that engineers had this passion for flow charts. And it was like but I could find a common ground because I like workflows. I love developing workflows. And so realizing that they would feel as passionately about that as I did about a chord in a song, or a certain line in a lyric or something like that, that I would be willing to go to the mat over. So I think that was a pretty important one. I think, often you see people leave companies. You see people leave because their gifts aren't welcome, or organizations. Particularly, I work with a lot of global corporations, and there's never been sort of a framework for the individual contributor. You get rewarded for supervising larger and larger groups of people. But
Right.
one of my long-term clients, and I feature him in the last chapter of the book, we just talked about our experience of working together over 20 years. And this guy could walk down the hall, step into a meeting, watch people struggling, and all of a sudden kind of say, well, have you thought about this, and have you looked at it in this way, and have you considered this? And all of a sudden there's $10 million of savings, boom, like that, on the
Wow.
table. And he called me one time. He had come up with something called it was called the balanced cost culture. And he said I was speaking to
Okay.
this in a room full of people, and the CEO came in with a coffee cup, sat in the back row, and he was listening to my presentation for 10 or 15 minutes. And he finally said, "This sounds really good to me. What does everybody else think?" And it's, of course, everybody else was on board with it, and it became an initiative. And I said, well, where did it come from? He said, well, it's something you wrote.
Ah,
We'd written something about, project management system, and I needed a closing paragraph. So what's called for is a balanced cost culture that's able to balance all of the competing elements in a project in order to achieve success, not just on one level, but on multiple levels. He said, so I had a line in a handbook that turned into a corporate initiative that's still at work today. And it's been so fun to kind of see how that stuff, lives on even after we're all gone too. But I'm always coming down to seeing the people who are frustrated because it's so difficult. They know what the right thing is. They know what the most effective thing is. And there's some aspect of the organization or its structure that's preventing it. And I don't know, I've used to see people, come to blows, and this antagonism between one group of people and another group of people. And I'd
yeah.
go, well, I've discovered that you're rewarding each group for conflicting behavior. This group's being rewarded when it spends money to find, oil and gas in the ground. This group gets rewarded
Right.
when it saves money on finding oil and gas in the ground. So you have these two at loggerheads. And the reality is that once they recognize that and we aligned the reward structure, then the entire system generated a lot more efficiency and a lot more return on investment.
Well, there was a lot that I take from what you just shared there, Rich. One of the things I was thinking is it's amazing the power of small things. Like you said, just
Oh,
that one line, can have this ripple effect that can end up moving mountains. And so that I find that inspirational because every day matters. Everything we do matters. So you might as well bring it. Right? I mean, that's what I take from that. And then the other thing is how we can paint ourselves in corners, and that's basically sort of that. There's a little bit of the emperor's new clothes kind of syndrome where people, oh, it's got to be this way, right? So you can come in sort of new, fresh, and say, why are these two things at loggerheads? Because they want two different. Oh, but that's just the way things emerge, and I don't think anybody's immune to that. So I think so the two things then are the small things matter, and always be questioning and always be looking at your base assumptions is the other big thing I took away from what you said there.
yeah.
Do you think did I get the meaning there? Is there something
Yeah,
more
I
to it?
think so. I think sometimes we look at interpersonal conflict in organizations as, well, this guy's just an a-hole. And the reality is that no, he might be being judged and evaluated and rewarded on a different set of from a different set of criteria that are the underlying reason that you think he's an a-hole and tells you no when you need him to tell you yes. So I think it was looking for ways
Yeah.
we can take the personality out of it, and it's not about the personality. It's because of the framework in which two sets of people are working that puts them at odds.
To me, there's two layers that you just pointed to. It's the actual factual element of, okay, that we have a shared mission here. How are we going to proceed? And being able to clearly take on the realities of that structure. And then you also brought in the personality side, which is how, our style of how we communicate and how we interact with people. And this is why I'm always sort of driving towards cultures of trust and respect. And respect is literally just, to me, it's just valuing other people. It's just saying this person they are a valid member of the human family, and they have unique gifts there. And if I'm wise and patient and open enough, I can learn and be enhanced by that person. And then that creates a bond because that person's being seen and heard and valued, and then you get past those sort of stylistic differences of all the various, whether it's a generational, whether it's a cultural, whether it's a demographic. None of those things really matter because the things that unite us are way bigger set than the things that divide us.
Right, right.
Especially if we're on the same team.
And I love your focus on leadership in terms of that being humble and being willing to recognize the way we think it should be done isn't necessarily the only way. Giving people the latitude we agree on the goal, and we don't have to necessarily agree on how we get there.
That's one of the answers to the problem you pointed to earlier about how do you let people give their gifts, right? If you're just saying you can give your gifts in this little lane here versus here's the end point, you go boy, you go girl, and let them express themselves, you're going to end up with a better dynamics in all those areas we're pointing to.
Right. There's a lot of strength, I think, in operating an organization in that way. And who wouldn't want to surround themselves with people smarter than they are? It's like, we've talked
Only
about
egos.
We talked about our shared musical passion. Well, I lead a band, and I want to have every other member of my band be much more musically accomplished than I am.
It's way more fun when you got awesome people to play with, right?
Yeah, and because they're always making us better too. That's the other reason,
of course,
for having that. So that notion of, I don't know where it came from, but servant leadership just resonates so much with me. And I've not run a company or managed a group of people. My leadership is expressed in 4 or 5 people, picking up musicians and learning material and going on stage and putting on a show. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun to be encouraging. It's fun to lift people up. it's fun to say, well, let's try your way of playing that particular, chorus than my way. And we end up getting to a much better product out of it. So
Well, music to me is a special case in the sense that there are rights and wrongs. I mean, you've got to be within the same key, you got to be in the same modality, you got to be in the same time signature, you've got to be. There are actual objective constraints on it
right, there are
as an
constraints. Right.
expression, or it gets unlistenable and you're speaking gibberish essentially to people, and it gets there's experimental with atonal and stuff like that, but nobody listens to that because it doesn't hit you in your heart, right?
Right.
So which is kind of the point. The point to me is the expression of the human experience. So there are those rules, but once you get past that sort of set, and again, I think it's analogous to a corporate mission as well, because you've got this sort of set of rules, the playground, here's the cultural things that are in bounds, then here's what's out of bounds. But within that, there's a wide universe. And really, it becomes very rewarding when you do see the individuality. So to me, like one of the highest compliments that I can give, and the thing I appreciate most in musicians, is when I can hear a short amount of a clip and tell it's them playing. Right. So to me, that's the highest level you can get when they've developed themselves, the point where it's like they have their voice and it's super distinctive. And it's it's also got to be good. You could be distinctive and be a little bit displeasing, but again, within those bounds and that style, I even if I don't particularly like the style, I'm always going to respect them as an artist if they found their voice and they speak to other people through that voice. So it seems to me like the only path to get to that is that attitude you were just describing, where you are allowing that leeway for individual expression. But it's obvious in music. But I think it's also analogous in the world of work too. What do you think?
I think culturally it's a lot more difficult because people who get to the tops of organizations are expected, it's like doctors. Doctors are trained to have a certain level of arrogance, and in some ways it's almost a defense mechanism
It definitely is.
And it helps them sort of bully their way through situations where they have no clue what's going to happen, but they need to create this sense of competence in the sense of to give a patient some hope. But
hope and confidence that they're in good hands. And there's obviously utilitarian reasons for that approach. It didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
But there is Patch Adams.
Yeah.
Right. So and it seems to me like if you're too far in one and you don't have enough of that human element, there's going to be some room for improvement.
Yeah.
The medical field, I think it's
no, I was it's a little bit of a lane over from that concept, but I was thinking about a time when an American company that I worked for was purchased by a British company. In this case, it was in the oil and gas business, and the leadership came in, and that whole sort of class consciousness and that class structure inside of old school, British society carried over, and it prevented this, and it led to it was BP, and it led to some of the huge tragedies and some of the largest accidents in the field, because these guys at the top were raised in a culture in which they had no consideration for lower classes and for the knowledge that might be coming from the trenches of an organization up, or from the guys who were saying these pipes are vibrating in a very dangerous way. And that gap, that class consciousness gap, really became a tragic, really allowed for some tragic things to happen. And it wasn't because those people were particular. It was that difference in those two cultures and what happened when they came together in a big corporation.
It shows you the power of the paradigm. You reminded me of a lesson I learned from my father, who was pretty young. He worked for a company called TRW, which was once in the top 100 companies in the United States. It's now no longer in existence, but at the time he was managing plant with I think there's maybe about 1,400 employees, and all the managers before him. There was a plant that they made compressor blades for jet engines, which is very high tolerance. Yeah, very, very high tolerance machining. And so they had the plant, and then they had the offices in another building sort of more towards the main road from the plant. And the culture there was, though, people in the white shirts and ties stayed in the building, and the people doing the machining stayed in the plant, and kind of never the twain shall meet. But that was not my dad's style. He spent most of his day in the plant. Why? Because that's where all the action was happening, and anybody who knew anything about what was really going on was there. They weren't in the front building, right? Because they're the ones, they're on the machines. They know where there's a problem. They know what's going good and what's not. And so, it's funny. He would, that's where he knew everybody. And so for years afterwards, whenever somebody'd hear my name, they say, "Oh, you're related to Steve Dardick." So yeah, that's my dad. If they work for TRW, they loved him because it was just a sign of respect, but he wasn't doing it for the purposes of blowing smoke up people's butts. He actually knew that that's where the wisdom was. Right. So
exactly.
He thought that was part and parcel of doing his job. So I was fortunate to learn that from him at a fairly young age. And it's that kind of but it's those paradigms, right? Because why are people all thinking that they are above, or it's not their role or something like that? It's usually, it can be cultural, but usually it's a function of, we're getting our egos in the way, right? We think we are our ego, and it's they're not seeing the big picture of what human beings actually are.
Yeah, I love that story, and what I love about it is that, where's the wisdom coming from in your organization? Do you know where it lives? And are you tapping it? Are you leveraging it? Are you using it to cut the cost of confusion? Because that wisdom will cut the cost of confusion, especially when you disseminate it in the right way and also at the right time. So a concept that I talk about is the time value of your knowledge. So, if the train has left the station and you show up with your late report, no, it doesn't matter if you're the smartest guy in your field. If it doesn't show up at the right time in the process, it's worthless. It can't help. It's a broader thing to think about communication and knowledge. It's the timing of it. It's the amount of it. I think of it being right-sized information delivered to the right person at the right moment. And so it's not one thing. It's that matching. It's niching it. It's getting it packaged so that it's exactly what people need to hear at the time that they need that information. And when your organization is doing that, you're demonstrating a huge amount of respect for people.
Yeah, it's respectful, and there's a little bit of I think it does take a little bit of humility. The fact that, again, it's a kind of a theme through our conversation, Rich, where it keeps popping up, where it does come down to how we think about human beings, and I keep going back to respect, but it's really just wanting to let people fully live and fully give their gifts and fully express themselves. And I think it's where we get, and I'm interested if you touch this in your book, The Cost of Confusion. But I think what stops up the pipes is we're so focused on us we want to broadcast and make sure we're seen. And I think we do better if we receive more. We focus on trying to see other people, and because once you see them, they naturally want to see you. It's better to receive first the information from them and give the gift of seeing them than it is to expect them to hang on your every word just because you're saying it, or just because you did something before in the past.
There was an early tagline after I created Transform Communications, and it was, "We help you speak in exactly the way you need to be heard."
Oh, tricky.
And particularly when you talk about leaders and executives, they're always saying, "What is it I want to say? What is it what I want to say?" And I take a step back and says, "Well, what is it all these people need to hear and understand?"
Yeah.
Because if you speak that to them, you're going to get so much more of what you want than if you put all your energy into trying to get your words just right and they hear what you want to say, what you want them to hear. And that's not the magic is. The magic is in when they hear what they need to hear to give you what you want, to get you where you want.
That is absolute gold. I mean, I think there's probably, I don't know what percentage, a high percentage of CEOs that if they would take that advice, their effectiveness would just absolutely skyrocket.
Maybe that's my roadshow. I was like, what do I have to offer? What do I have to offer to people at that level? I partner with another consultant who was, it's funny, when we met, I thought he was a real jerk. and he was a senior VP at one of my client companies, and they asked us to come in for kind of a peer assist on some stuff. And I took away, man, this guy's just really arrogant, SOB. And about 4 or 5 years later, I get a phone call and he's looking for me because of some work we did. And now he's out on his own at his own consulting firm. And so, but what I realized is that he operated at that level. He operates at that C-suite level, and he needs that kind of, you need that arrogance and that level of confidence that I would call BS on, but it's just expected. And so I let him sell
Well,
there, and
I'd
then
say
I
that's
deliver here.
well, my feeling on that, Rich, is that is analogous to that same thing of the AMA professional distance of the doctors that you pointed to earlier.
Mm.
I think it's a similar sort of a paradigm that people take on. So in that way, there is utility and there's a reason it's there and it does serve a purpose. So I'm not going to say that it has no place or no bearing, but I'm also going to say that it has downsides that are probably as far down, if not more of a drawback than the advantages you get from it. So in other words, those that are able to cultivate the actual competence of being skilled in whatever their particular discipline is, and don't have that, you felt it as arrogance, but different people will feel it in different ways. But whatever that is, I see that as noise. I don't see it as
Mm.
something that has to be there necessarily. Is
Right,
what I've
right.
come to
It's
see.
not
Yeah.
contributing value necessarily, but yeah.
No, you're far better off if it's coming from a place of ego or protection. It might not just be ego; it might just be political, or you feel vulnerable, or some sort of defense or protection sort of strategy. And most of these things are unconscious; they're not something that people are thinking about. They're just learned behaviors, like you said. In that world, that's your learned behavior because that's what you're seeing around you. But for those few that are able to break free of those chains, I think they end up standing even taller because people come to love them because they let people know them.
I'm thinking about somebody who's in a position of really limiting everybody's ability to give gifts.
Okay.
Mine, all the people working for him. And you just go, how does somebody get to a place at that high level of an organization without somebody seeing the huge constraint that it is and the amount of unnecessary work that we do to jump through hoops and not add any value? And I think that's
Well,
the
to me,
reason
that's
I'm
a
not
great
a
question. So
yeah.
what's your guess to an answer to that question? Because I think that's an excellent question.
Well, I mean, so, part of me wants to go, man, who beat you up when you were, you know what I mean? Who kicked your ass on the playground? I mean, I'm starting to look at a lot of times there's a woundedness to people who operate that way. And it's not my job to fix that, but it does help me find compassion for people. And sometimes, I could end up having a divine conversation with somebody like that in an accidental setting. It's like you run across them and you just know that this conversation is headed to a place, outside of what you anticipated because your ability to see them in that moment, not as an adversary and an a-hole, but as somebody who's compensating for some woundedness. And what can I do? How can I serve that person and serve that person's development in that moment?
Well, when it results in some sort of a openness, or even maybe perhaps an aha moment for the person, or something that it might not happen in the moment. Sometimes, like it goes back to what you said earlier about that small line in the one manual, is like, you never know. You could be planting a seed that sprouts a year or a decade later, and we don't get the chance to view that. So to me, that just underscores the importance of being present and honest and courageous, and being there as showing up as a real boy, and
Yeah,
not the
yeah,
puppet
yeah,
version of
yeah.
Pinocchio, right?
Yeah, and you make a great point too, that it's like people that do the work that we do, we need courageous clients. We don't, it's like my wife for years had said, Rich, what you do in transform communications is not for the people who need it, because there's a whole world full of corporations that need what you do. It's for the people who want what you do. And I've had to learn that I can walk into situations and I can see what I can do, but if those people don't want that, if they don't want that shift, if they don't want that change, if they're not willing to be genuine and be real, then they're not my clients. They're not my ideal clients.
Yeah. the profession of consulting does have a bit of a stain because sometimes it's they don't really want to learn. They just want to have the I checked the box, or it's the cover, or it's tell me what I already know so that I can be more assured, or it's not really a true exploration of the real, more a bolstering of what we already believe. Whether it's real or not doesn't matter as much. And I think there's way too much of that in the profession of consulting. Although I got to say, most consultants that I meet are definitely in the wanting to get to the real and serve. Very few that I ever actually come across in this forum would I put in the other categories. But I think the big consulting firms tend to be guilty of that. Why? Because they've got a different paradigm they're operating on, right? We all sort of believe, we all move in the direction that serves what we think is our best interest. And that can cause a lot of myopia in the world.
Yeah, I met a VP from Accenture, and he said, here's the deal, Rich. You're a guy that wants to make a difference for your clients. In my business, it's all about the billable hours. So it was
There
like,
you go.
I spent 10 years
Ding.
trying to, trying to partner or join or create a department doing what I do, and to sort of, have bigger impact. And I
Yeah.
finally stopped. I was like, oh, okay. I'm not a fit with these big consulting firms. Usually I would come in, either parallel to them and still be working for the clients after they left. And they're like, why is this guy still here doing stuff? Because I'm focusing on communication, and I'm focusing on what we call benefits realization. Okay. The consultants told you all these things you needed to do to operate more efficiently and get your business where you want it to be. Then they leave. And I'm like, but wait,
Yeah.
I want to help these people realize all the benefits that we promised them are here. And that's a different, it's a different kind of work. It's a different kind of work, I think.
Absolutely is. And it was something that I was very reluctant to embrace the moniker of coach or consultant, because for that very reason, it just seems so cheap to me. It's easy to come in and say, diagnose and say, here, just do this. And then you get to go home and they got to sit in the mire. It's kind of icky to me. And so, we're definitely in alignment on that. I think the work is actually in those, I call them SIA, sustained incremental actions that over time just end up making the difference. And we tend to what the reason those big contracts or these big sort of, fancy 110-page documents that, are very impressive. The reason they get so much attention and so much resources thrown at them, I think, is because we want to believe in kind of magic. We want to believe that there's a big idea that's just going to change everything. And we want to resist the idea that no, real life is a day by day, minute by minute, disciplined thing that you are doing. And that's why paradigms are so important, because it's affecting every single decision and perception that you have moment to moment. And that's where the magic is. It's in the little. It's in the little and the constant and the sustained. It's not in the big sweeping revelations.
Right. I had run across organizations where I call it silver bullet thinking. They're looking for the next big thing that's their silver bullet that's going to, like you said, it's the magic. It's going to make all their problems disappear. And it's not like that.
No, it doesn't match reality.
It's in the everyday things. It's in the connections. It's in the foundations. It's in the knowledge. It's in the knowledge and how it flows. The timing in which it's available to people, and where that wisdom doesn't just live in one corner, that wisdom is leveraged throughout the organization also. And you've got to get to that point where you're taking what people bring and you're integrating it and you're leveraging its value, and you're seeing and appreciating the people who are bringing those gifts.
I love that. To me, that view is really almost a qualification to help people in a way. I mean, hearing you say that, I have absolute confidence that somebody who brings you in is going to get whatever you charge. They're going to get more than that in value, because this is the kind of thing that needs to infect your people to get them to see the bigger picture and more of deeper reality, and get past the, hey, look, nobody's perfect. We all have our flat sides. We all have things we're working on. We're all works in progress. That's why we do what we do. But we need to have that humility and that openness and that hunger to just be a little bit better tomorrow. And one of the things I kind of preach to people I'm working with a lot is I say, status quo's got to go, and tomorrow we got to be better than we are today. So that becomes sort of a mission, saying, okay, look, I'm going to continuously learn. I'm going to be hungry to learn from everybody. And I'm not going to be afraid of mistakes, because those are opportunities to learn. So it starts getting all these healthy sorts of mindsets encouraged and nourished. What do
Yeah.
you think?
Well, I was thinking about for 6 years, I have a bass player in my band who was as far away on the political spectrum as we could be.
Okay.
And he designs and machines gun parts
Okay.
for a living, right? Which we couldn't talk about often. But what we did agree on is that both of us, you know, we approach life as a continuous improvement project. And so it was always about, every day, what can I do better to be more efficient be a better contributor, be a better husband, father, partner, band leader, consultant. And the same thing, what can we do with this band to make us a better, more polished, more professional, more entertaining act going forward? And so
Shared mission.
whatever we had difference wise, we had this really powerful overlap and appreciation for one another's work ethic, if you will. And I think that's the challenge to all of us who are working in organizations, is finding that commonality, the ways that we have the things we share in common.
I love that. It's a wonderful story. First of all, you have a shared mission, right? You have compatible end goals, and
Yeah.
that allows you to work side by side. And the manner, but it sort of fits into our earlier conversations about, there's more than one path to getting there, but we do have to agree on, here's the effect we want to have, or here's the overall parameters of what we think is good and desirable. We do have to have alignment there. So there's foundational principle things that we have to agree on. Once we have that, then there's many paths to that, and cultivating the attitude that says, hey, great, let me learn from your path. I wouldn't have taken that path. Maybe I can pick something up from that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, I was smiling when you said that, Rich, is because I said, or when you said about the guns, my grandfather, David Dardick, invented the open chamber system, which is a novel gun system. And about a decade ago, I started a company called Open Chamber Systems that was building on his inventions. So I'm technically in the gun business myself. So I'm like maybe between, I got the guns, the music, and the consulting. We got all this stuff going on together.
Right.
It's funny.
Uh,
Hey, listen, it's been fantastic to get to know you a little bit, my friend.
yeah, great fun. These conversations, I've probably had 3 or 4 of these now, that it's like, well, let's just see where this goes. And I could hear the spots where you're going to be able to boom, 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 put some nice bookends on the sections and things like that. So I think you got plenty to work with.
Oh, I think this was wonderful. I'm very happy with our discussion, and I very much appreciate your time. I'm glad to get to know. I'm sure I can find your music, right, on YouTube, and so you got it on Spotify.
You can. I have a YouTube channel. Then we also are streamable on all of the Apple Music, all the music streaming platforms. And if you're old school, you can contact me, and I still have CDs that I mail out to people.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, well, I will definitely be doing that. And anybody listening to this, of course, if you like what Rich is laying down here, and you're curious, definitely click the links and reach out, and guarantee you there's some value there, no doubt about that. So, Rich, thank you so much, man.
Tom, thank you so much. And I think the I Power model is just it's such a great thing, and I think the timing's perfect for everybody. And so to your audience, I just want to say, thanks for bringing that lens to the work world that we all have to operate in. So thanks again. Appreciate it, Tom.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
Rich, thank you so much for being on the show today with me. I very much enjoyed our conversation. I think you dropped a lot of good wisdom nuggets for the audience. I really liked how you identified the understanding deficit, that it's something that takes a little bit of effort, right? It's on leaders and leadership to make sure that we're nourishing the people and not just dictating. Let's say you framed one where it was, you don't assume people are just going to be naturally emotionally connected to a strategic objective, but rather you have to drill down a little further. We've got these 20 outcomes we're looking for. Outcome 2, 9, and 11 are going to be what this person's going to relate to, and really spending a little bit of that extra energy to actually communicate to either whether it be a department or even as granular as the person. I think that's a fantastic bit of advice for leaders. A little bit of awareness towards CEOs, right? To the idea of what they need to have heard from you rather than what you want to say to them. That's maybe a linguistic trick, but the paradigm shift, I think, is very, very powerful. And I think that's fantastic advice. Your natural gift of just asking why. It's such a pain in the ass, right? But it's a pain in the ass in a good way, in a productive way, because otherwise we're a slave to our paradigms. If we don't actually step back and ask why is there a better, why do we do it this way? Might there be a better way? And leave space for trying new things and new ideas from people, no matter where those ideas are coming from. I really enjoyed the strings of humility that went through, and openness that went through our discussion today. Obviously, our philosophy as it relates to working collaboratively, whether it's a creative endeavor as far as music or a creative endeavor as far as business, seems to be in very good alignment. And so I feel very honored and very fortunate that we were able to connect in this way. So thank you again, Rich, and thank you for listening to our conversation.
This has been the Eye of Power podcast with Tom Dardick. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to thank my brother, Scott Dardick, for the music and his music production. If you'd like to reach me, simply email Tom at dardickcommunications.com.